They say a joke is only funny if everyone laughs. But at my father's retirement dinner, I was the only one silent. When his oldest friend clapped a hand on Dad's shoulder and toasted to his saint-like patience for raising the affair child, the ballroom erupted. I was 32 years old, yet in that moment, I shrank back into the convenient sin they had branded me with since birth. I looked at my father, waiting for a defense that never came. The tablecloths were a stark, blinding white, the kind that made you afraid to spill a single drop of wine, lest you ruin the pristine illusion of the evening. It was my father's retirement dinner, a grand affair held at the exquisite Oakwood Country Club, a place that smelled of old money, lemon polish, and the specific, suffocating perfume of small-town judgment. I sat at the main table, my hands folded in my lap, squeezing my own fingers until the knuckles turned ivory. I was 32 years old, a senior marketing director in Harlan City, a woman who managed million-dollar budgets and navigated corporate takeovers with a steady hand. Yet, sitting here, between my mother's rigid shoulder and the looming presence of my father, Grant Russell, I felt like a child again. I felt like the mistake. The room was filled with the town's elite doctors, lawyers, the school board members who had whispered about me in the grocery store aisles 3 decades ago. They were all here to honor Grant Russell, the man who had served as the town's most reliable structural engineer for 40 years. He was the man who kept things standing. He was the man who held things together, except for me. The applause died down as Uncle Rick, not my real uncle, but my father's oldest friend and drinking buddy, tapped the microphone. Rick's face was flushed with gin and sentimentality. He leaned heavily on the podium, grinning at my father. "Grant, you are a better man than I am," Rick boomed, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceilings. "I mean that. We all know the road hasn't been smooth. We all know the heavy lifting you did at home, not just at the office." The room went quiet. I felt the air pressure drop. I knew what was coming. I had been bracing for it since I received the invitation. Rick chuckled, gesturing vaguely in my direction with a glass of scotch. Most men would have walked away. "Grant, but you stayed. You raised the affair child like she was your own blood. That is the measure of a saint. Ladies and gentlemen, a true saint." The punchline landed. The room erupted in laughter. It wasn't malicious laughter. Not entirely. It was the laughter of relief, of a community acknowledging an open secret that had been sanitized into a joke. It was the laughter that said, "We know, and we forgive you, Grant, for the burden of her." I froze. My smile was plastered on my face, a defensive reflex honed over 28 years of practice. I did not move. I did not blink. I felt the heat rising up my neck, a burning rash of humiliation that no amount of foundation could cover. I looked at my father. Grant Russell was laughing. He sat back in his chair, swirling his wine, nodding with a benevolent, weary grace. He didn't look at me. He didn't reach for my hand to squeeze it, to signal that Rick was a drunk fool and that I was his daughter. Period. He basked in the adoration. He accepted the title of martyr. My mother, Marilyn, let out a short, breathless laugh beside me. She reached for her water glass, her hand trembling so slightly that only I could see the ripples on the surface of the liquid. She took a sip, her eyes fixed on the centerpiece of white lilies. She did not look at me either. I was the prop. I was the visible evidence of my mother's supposed infidelity and my father's supposed mercy. I was the object lesson in the center of the room. The speeches continued, but the sound turned into a dull roar in my ears, like the rushing of blood. I focused on breathing. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. I had to get through the dessert course. I had to get through the coffee. Then I could leave. When the dinner finally broke up into mingling clusters, I excused myself, claiming I needed the restroom. The sanctuary of the bathroom stall was the only place I could drop the mask. I stood there for 5 minutes, pressing my forehead against the cool tile, trying to stop the shaking in my hands. "You are 32. I told myself, "You do not live here anymore. You pay your own rent. You are real." I washed my hands, reapplied my lipstick with surgical precision, and walked back out into the hallway. I intended to say my goodbyes and drive straight back to the city, regardless of the late hour. As I rounded the corner near the coat check, I heard my father's voice. It was low, lacking the performative warmth he used for the crowd. He was speaking to Rick. "You really hammered it home tonight, Rick." My father said. Rick's voice was slurred. "I just wanted them to know. Grant, I wanted them to know what a good man looks like. Any other man would have tossed them both out on the street back in 1992. I stopped. I pressed my back against the velvet wallpapered wall, hidden by a large potted fern in the angle of the corridor. My father sighed. The sound of a man settling a heavy load. I did what I had to do. Decency. Rick, it is about decency. But you know, looking at her, sometimes it is hard. She was never mine. Every time I look at her, I see the betrayal. She was never mine. The words were not new. I had felt them in his silence, in the way he pulled his hand away when I tried to hold it as a toddler, in the way he never attended my piano recitals, but never missed my sister's soccer games. But hearing them spoken aloud, with such casual, finalized detachment, severed something vital in my chest. "I stayed for decency," he repeated. I turned around and walked back toward the restroom, my heels silent on the plush carpet. I could not face him. I could not let him see that I had heard. Because if I did, I would scream, and if I screamed, I would never stop. I found my mother near the entrance, adjusting her shawl. Her face was pale, her smile straining at the edges. "Leah," she said, sounding relieved to see me. "There you are. Dad is just getting his coat. I am leaving." "Mom," I said. My voice sounded strange, hollow and metallic. "Leaving now." "But you were going to stay at the house tonight. Your room is ready." "I cannot stay," I said. I looked at her, searching for something: anger, defense, maternal protection. I saw only fear. "Mom," I whispered, "did you hear what Rick said?" Marilyn flinched. She smoothed the fabric of her shawl, her eyes darting around to see if anyone was listening. "Oh, Leah, it was just a joke. You know how Rick gets when he drinks. It was not a joke to Dad," I said. He laughed. "Mom, he let everyone laugh at me. He let everyone laugh at you." Her expression hardened, not into anger at them, but into a desperate, pleading command directed at me. "Please, Leah, do not stir up old pain. Tonight is about your father. He has worked hard for this. Just let it go." She looked terrified. It was a look I had seen 1,000 times, a panic that bubbled up whenever I asked questions, whenever I tried to step out of the role of the apologetic daughter. She was afraid, but she never told me what she was afraid of. I drove back to Harlan City in silence. The highway was a ribbon of darkness, the only light coming from the dashboard and the occasional passing truck. The drive took 2 hours. For 2 hours, I replayed the tape in my head. She was never mine. I had spent my entire life trying to prove him wrong. Not biologically, I accepted the story that I was the product of my mother's affair, but spiritually, I had tried to be so good, so successful, so quiet and undemanding that he would have to love me. I thought if I won enough awards, if I made enough money, if I bought them the right Christmas gifts, the affair child label would fade, and I would just be Leah. But I was fighting a war that had ended before I was born. When I unlocked the door to my apartment, the silence of my own space usually brought me peace. Tonight, it felt lonely. I tossed my keys on the counter and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window that overlooked the city skyline. Harlan City was awake, a grid of amber and white lights. I looked at my reflection in the glass. Dark hair, pale skin, eyes that everyone said looked like my mother's. But who did the rest of me belong to, I had never asked. That was the unwritten rule of the Russell household. You do not ask about the man my mother slept with. You do not ask about the biology. You simply hold your head down and be grateful that Grant Russell didn't throw you in the trash. I sank onto my sofa, still in my cocktail dress, and let the tears finally come. They were hot and angry. I had built my entire self-worth on a foundation of sand, I was 32, and I was still the little girl waiting for her daddy to look at her without contempt. The next morning, I went to work because that is what I did. I worked. Tessa Mora found me in the break room, staring at the coffee machine as if it were an intricate puzzle. Tessa was my counterpart in the sales division, a woman with sharp eyes and zero tolerance for nonsense. She was also the only person who knew the full extent of my family drama. "You look like hell," Tessa said, leaning against the counter. "Thanks," I said, my voice raspy. "The retirement dinner," she asked. I nodded. I told her about the speech. I told her about the hallway. Tessa didn't gasp. She didn't offer empty platitudes. She set her mug down with a deliberate clack. "Leah," she said, "stop it." "Stop what?" "Stop trying to win a trial that was rigged before you were born." I looked at her, stung. "I am not trying to—" "Yes, you are," she interrupted. "You are killing yourself trying to be perfect for a man who has built his entire identity around being your victim. He loves it. Leah, he loves being the saint who put up with the bastard child. If he actually loved you, he wouldn't let his friends humiliate you in public." "It is complicated," I said, the reflex defense kicking in. "It is not complicated," she said. "It is cruel, and you are enabling it by playing along." She took a sip of her coffee, watching me over the rim. "You need to know the truth, Leah, not the story they tell, but the actual truth. Have you ever even thought about finding your biological father?" I shook my head. "Mom says he is gone. She says it was a mistake and he wanted nothing to do with us." "Your mom says a lot of things to keep the boat from rocking," Tessa said. "But you are drowning." She reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. "Order a test," she said. "No," I said immediately. "I do not want to open that door. The door is already open. Leah, the wind is howling through the house. Just get the answer. Maybe if you find out who he is, you will stop looking for him in your father's eyes." I went back to my desk, but I couldn't focus. Tessa's words rattled around in my skull. Rigged trial. By 3 o'clock, I was exhausted. Not physical exhaustion, but a soul-deep weariness. I was tired of negotiating with shame. I was tired of being the family secret that everyone knew. I opened a browser tab. I searched for DNA testing kits. I didn't do it for revenge. I didn't do it to expose my mother or hurt my father. I did it because I needed to know where I began. I ordered the most comprehensive kit available. Expedited shipping. I entered my credit card information with a numbness that frightened me. Click. Order confirmed. Just as the confirmation screen loaded, my work email pinged. I tabbed over, expecting a client request or a meeting invite. Instead, the subject line read, "Inquiry regarding legacy file updates. H. Vance Estate." I frowned. Harold Vance was a name everyone in the state knew. He was a philanthropist, a tycoon, the kind of man whose name was on hospital wings and libraries. He had passed away recently. It had been all over the news. I opened the email. "Dear Ms. Russell, we are currently updating the legacy files for the late Harold Vance's charitable beneficiaries and historical records. Your name has appeared in our cross-referencing system regarding a dormant file from 1992. We kindly request a confirmation of your current contact information and identity verification to proceed with closing this administrative loop. Sincerely, the Office of the Estate of Harold Vance." I stared at the screen. 1992 was the year I was born. It had to be a mistake, a phishing scam, maybe, or perhaps my parents had received some small charity grant when I was born. That didn't make sense. Grant Russell was proud. He never took handouts. I marked the email as unread, telling myself I would deal with it later. My mind was too full of the DNA test. I realized I needed something. The testing service recommended having family information handy to help build the tree. But more than that, I suddenly felt a desperate need to see the paper trail of my own existence. I wanted to see my birth certificate. I wanted to see if the space for father was blank, or if Grant's name was there, signed in his heavy, architectural hand. I left work early. I pointed my car back toward the suburbs. My parents' house was a sprawling colonial that always felt slightly too cold, no matter the season. When I walked in, the smell of potpourri and floor wax hit me. Mom. Dad. I called out. They were in the den. Grant was watching the news. His feet up, Marilyn was flipping through a magazine. They looked up. Surprised to see me back so soon after the dinner, Leah Marilyn said. Standing up. Is everything okay? You left so quickly last night. I am fine, I said, keeping my voice even. I just need to pick up some documents. I am updating my passport and getting my real ID sorted out. The city is being strict about paperwork. It was a lie, but a plausible one. What documents? Grant asked, not looking away from the television. My birth certificate, I said, and maybe my vaccination records. Marilyn froze. It was subtle, just a hesitation in the way she set her magazine down. But I saw it. Oh, she said, I think those are in the safe deposit box at the bank. Honey, I cannot get to them today. I don't think so, I said, stepping further into the room. I saw the file box in the study last Christmas when we were looking for the insurance papers. It was labeled Leah. Grant turned his head then. His eyes were narrowed. Why the sudden rush? He asked. You have a passport. It expires soon. I lied. And I have a business trip coming up. I just need to grab it. Dad, it is my document, Grant huffed, turning back to the TV. Do what you want. Just do not make a mess of your mother's filing system. Marilyn looked like she wanted to object, but she couldn't do it without raising suspicion. I'll help you look, she said quickly. No need, I said, already moving toward the study. I know where it is. I walked into the study, my heart hammering against my ribs. I went to the large oak filing cabinet in the corner. I knew exactly where the family files were. I pulled open the drawer. The metal tracks hummed. Russell, Grant, Russell, Marilyn, Russell, Page, and there it was. Russell, Leah. I pulled the folder out. It was heavy, thicker than it should have been for just a birth certificate and some school records. I opened it on the desk. There were report cards. There were awards. But underneath those standard papers, there was a dense stack of medical forms. Brightstone Women's Pavilion. That was the hospital where I was born. It was a private, upscale facility in the next county over. My parents had always said they went there because the local hospital was undergoing renovations. But I had never questioned it. I flipped through the pages, invoices, insurance claims. But there were other papers, carbon copies of forms with text that had been obscured or photocopied poorly. Leah Marilyn's voice came from the doorway. She sounded breathless. I jumped, guilt flushing through me. I found it, I said, holding up a certified copy of my birth certificate. I did not have time to read the medical files. I shoved the birth certificate into my purse. Is that all you needed? Marilyn asked, walking into the room. She was eyeing the open folder on the desk. Yes, I said. I closed the folder. Why is this so thick? Mom. She blinked, her smile tight. Oh, you know me. I keep everything, every little drawing, every doctor's note. I am sentimental. It didn't feel sentimental. It felt forensic. I took the birth certificate and left. I couldn't stay in that house a second longer. That night, back in my apartment, I sat on my kitchen floor with the contents of my purse dumped out. I held the birth certificate. Mother Marilyn Russell, Father Grant Russell. He had signed it. He had claimed me legally, even while rejecting me emotionally. I felt a surge of confusion. If he hated the affair so much, why put his name on the line? Why not leave it blank? Why not let my mother give me her maiden name, Decency? He had said, martyrdom. I sighed and began to clean out my purse, which had become a graveyard of old receipts and gum wrappers. As I shook the bag upside down over the trash, a small, stiff piece of plastic fluttered out. It wasn't from my purse. It must have been stuck to the back of the birth certificate I had pulled from the folder. Clinging with static, I picked it up. It was the torn corner of a hospital wristband, the old kind, made of plasticized paper with little holes for the snap closure. It was yellowed with age. I brought it under the bright under-cabinet light. It was just a fragment. I could see the date stamped on it, October 14th, 1992, my birthday. But the name typed above the date was cut off. All I could see were the last 3 letters of the surname, NCE. My last name was Russell. My mother's maiden name was Miller. I stared at the letters, NCE. My mind flashed back to the email I had received earlier that day, the estate of Harold Vance. Vance. A chill went through me that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. I dropped the piece of plastic on the counter as if it were burning hot. Vance. No, that was impossible. That was insane. Harold Vance was a billionaire. He was a public figure. My mother was a housewife from the suburbs. But the letters were there. NCE. And the wristband was dated the day I was born. I looked at the birth certificate again. Grant Russell. I looked at the wristband fragment. I suddenly felt very sick. The narrative I had lived with for 32 years, the cheating mother, the saintly father, the unwanted child was a heavy, suffocating blanket, but at least I knew the shape of it. I knew how to navigate under its weight. This was a rip in the fabric. I grabbed my phone and opened the DNA testing app. The status bar said, "Kit ordered, estimated arrival 2 days, 2 days, then I would spit in a tube, then I would wait 6 weeks. I looked at the wristband again. I didn't know what it meant. Maybe it was a roommate's wristband. Maybe babies shared bassinets. But I remembered the thickness of the file folder. I remembered the panic in my mother's eyes. I remembered the way my father said, "She was never mine." He hadn't said, "She is another man's." He said, "She was never mine." And then, the most terrifying thought of all settled over me. If I wasn't Grant Russell's daughter, and if this wristband didn't belong to a Russell, who was I? I picked up the wristband fragment and placed it carefully into a Ziploc bag. I put the bag in my kitchen drawer, beneath the silverware, hidden away. I turned off the lights, but I knew I wouldn't sleep. The trial wasn't just rigged. The trial was about a crime I didn't even know had been committed. And for the first time, I wasn't trying to prove my innocence. I was trying to find the body. The email arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, buried between a coupon for organic dog food and a LinkedIn notification. It was innocuous. Just a standard alert from the genealogy company. Your results are ready. I was sitting at my desk, surrounded by quarterly projection reports. The office hummed with the low-grade anxiety of approaching deadlines, but the noise faded instantly as I stared at the subject line. My heart did a strange, painful flip against my ribs. I had been waiting 6 weeks for this. 6 weeks of checking my spam folder. 6 weeks of wondering if spit in a plastic tube could actually dismantle a 30-year-old family myth. I clicked the link. The page loaded slowly, a spinning wheel that seemed to mock my rising pulse. "Welcome, Leah," the screen read cheerfully. "Here is your ancestry breakdown." I didn't care about the pie chart showing what percentage of me was Irish or Scandinavian. I scrolled past the colorful maps, past the health traits, down to the section labeled Parental Matches. I had uploaded my mother's raw data years ago. She had done a test for fun. A Christmas gift from my sister Paige. Thinking it would be a hoot to find out if she was part French, I had access to her account. The system should have automatically linked us as mother/daughter. I looked at the list. No parent/child matches found. I blinked. I refreshed the page. Maybe I was looking at the wrong section. I clicked on Close Family. Paige Russell. Half-sister. I stared at the screen until the pixels started to blur. Half-sister. That made sense. If my father wasn't my father, then Paige, who was definitely Grant's daughter, would be my half-sister. That fit the affair child narrative perfectly. But then I looked closer at the shared DNA percentage, 1,200 centimeters shared. Predicted relationship first cousin or half-sibling. That part was expected. But where was Marilyn? I opened a second tab and logged into my mother's account. I pulled up her match list. Leah Russell. No match found. I sat back in my ergonomic chair, the leather creaking loudly in the silent office. My hands were cold. I felt a distinct, physical sensation of unreality. As if the floor had suddenly dropped 3 inches. The test said I wasn't related to Grant. Fine, I knew that. I expected that. But the test also said I wasn't related to Marilyn. It had to be a mistake, a sample swap at the lab, a database error. I had Marilyn's eyes. Everyone said so. I had her nervous habit of tucking hair behind my ear. I was her daughter. She had carried me. There were photos of her pregnant, her belly swelling like a moon under floral maternity dresses. I closed my laptop. I couldn't process this here. Under the fluorescent lights, with Tessa sitting 10 feet away typing furiously, I went home early, claiming a migraine. It wasn't entirely a lie. My head was pounding with a pressure that felt tectonic. That evening, I ordered a second test from a different company. I paid for overnight shipping. I swabbed my cheek until it was raw. I mailed it back the next morning. The waiting period for the second test was only 3 weeks, but it felt like 3 years. I walked through my life like a ghost. I ate food I couldn't taste. I sat in meetings and nodded at charts I didn't see. When the second email came, I was in my apartment kitchen, holding a glass of water I didn't remember pouring. I opened the results on my phone. Maternal lineage. No biological connection to Marilyn Russell. Paternal lineage. No biological connection to Grant Russell. I put the phone down on the counter. I walked to the sink and vomited. It wasn't just nausea. It was vertigo. The world was spinning. If Marilyn wasn't my mother, then the affair story was a lie. If Grant wasn't my father, the martyrdom was a lie. But if neither of them were my parents, then who was I? And whose baby was in all those photos I drove to my parents' house on a Sunday? It was raining, a gray, relentless drizzle that matched the static in my brain. I found Marilyn in the sunroom, repotting orchids. She looked so peaceful. Her hands deep in the dark soil, her face serene. It was a scene of domestic tranquility that suddenly felt like a stage set. "Mom," I said. She looked up, smiling. "Leah." I didn't know you were coming by. I didn't sit down. I stood in the doorway, clutching my purse like a shield. "I took a DNA test," I said. Her smile faltered, just a fraction, a tiny crack in the porcelain. "Oh," she said, wiping her hands on a towel. "Those things are fun. Did you find out we are Vikings? I'm not related to Dad." I said. Marilyn's shoulders stiffened. She turned back to the orchids, picking up a spray bottle. "Well, Leah, we knew that might be a possibility. You know the history. The history. The affair. The convenient lie. I am not related to you either. Mom." The spray bottle dropped from her hand. It hit the tile floor with a loud plastic clatter, rolling under the table. Marilyn didn't move to pick it up. She stood with her back to me, her shoulders hunched, the silence stretched out, thick and suffocating. "Mom," I whispered. She turned around slowly. Her face was gray. She looked 20 years older than she had 10 seconds ago. I expected denial. I expected her to say the test was wrong, that science was fallible, that I was being ridiculous. Instead, she looked at me with eyes full of a terrifying resignation. "I didn't know how to tell you," she said softly. "Tell me what?" "That I am adopted. That you lied to me every single day of my life. I didn't know how to tell you without losing you," she said. Her voice broke. The confession hit me like a physical blow. It wasn't a denial. It was an admission. "You aren't my mother," I asked, my voice trembling. "Leah," she said, taking a step toward me. "I am your mother. I raised you. I loved you from the moment I held you. But you didn't give birth to me." She stopped. She looked down at her hands, still stained with soil. "No," she whispered. "I didn't. Why?" I demanded. "Why lie? Why let Dad treat me like garbage for 30 years if what is going on in here?" Grant's voice boomed from the hallway. He walked in, wearing his golf windbreaker, looking irritated by the disruption. "Leah is upsetting you." "Marilyn," he said, moving to stand beside her. "What is it now?" "Leah, more drama." I looked at him, the man who had called me the affair child, the man who had made my existence a testament to his own saintly suffering. "I know. Dad, I said, know what? That you are ungrateful. We have known that for years. I know I'm not your daughter. I said. Grant let out a short, bark-like laugh. He looked at Marilyn. She finally figured it out. Took her long enough. See? Marilyn. I told you she would sniff it out eventually. The bad blood always shows. He turned back to me, his face twisted in a smug sneer. So now you know, he said. You are not mine. I have carried you, fed you, clothed you, all while knowing you were the product of your mother's weakness. You should be on your knees thanking me. He was enjoying this. He was reveling in the moment of final confirmation. He was the hero of his own tragedy. She isn't hers either. Grant, I said. The sneer didn't leave his face immediately. It froze there, suspended in confusion. What he asked? I am not Mom's biological child either. I said. The DNA test proved it. I am not related to either of you. Grant looked at Marilyn. Marilyn was weeping silently, her hands covering her mouth. Marilyn, Grant said. His voice had lost its bluster. It was dangerous now, low and sharp. Marilyn, what is she talking about? Marilyn shook her head, sobbing. You told me it was an affair, Grant shouted. The sound made the glass panes of the sunroom rattle. You told me you slept with that contractor from the city. You let me believe I had to, Marilyn cried out. I had to give you a reason. A reason for what? For bringing a stray dog into my house. Grant roared. He turned on me, his face purple with rage. But the rage wasn't the same. It wasn't the superior, controlled disdain he usually wore. This was the panic of a man whose foundational myth had just collapsed. If I wasn't the affair child, he wasn't the martyr. He was just a man who had been cruel to a child for no reason. Get out. He spat at me. Grant Marilyn tried to reach for him. I said get out, he screamed, shoving her hand away. Both of you. No. Just her. You, he pointed a shaking finger at me. You get out of my house. I didn't need to be told twice. I turned and ran. I drove until my hands stopped shaking, which took 40 minutes. I parked in the lot of a strip mall and just breathed. I felt hollowed out. But strangely, amidst the nausea and the shock, there was a tiny, cold kernel of relief. I wasn't the product of betrayal. I wasn't the bad blood. I was a mystery, and mysteries could be solved. The next morning, I called in sick to work. I had a new mission. If Marilyn and Grant weren't my parents, then I had been adopted. But Marilyn's reaction, the fear, the desperation suggested this wasn't a standard adoption, and the affair cover story was too elaborate, too damaging. To be used unless the alternative was worse, I needed the source. I needed Brightstone Women's Pavilion. I drove to the hospital. It was a sleek, modern complex now, all glass and steel, very different from the brick building in the old photos I had seen. I went to the records department in the basement. It smelled of toner and stale coffee. I am requesting my full medical records from October 1992. I told the clerk, a young woman with pink streaks in her hair. My name is Leah Russell. She tapped on her keyboard. Russell? Okay, 1992. She frowned. That is weird, she muttered. What I asked. Leaning forward, most of our records from the 90s were digitized years ago. She said, but your file. It says, file corrupted/incomplete. It directs me to the hard copy archives. But there is a flag on it. A flag? Yeah. Administrative hold. Usually that means legal is involved, or it is a sealed adoption record. But you are asking for your own birth records, right? Yes. She sighed. Look, I cannot give you the file if there is a hold. You have to fill out Form 82B and submit it to the Director of Information. It takes about 10 business days. 10 days. I didn't have 10 days. Is there anything you can tell me? I pleaded. I just found out. I just need to know where I came from. The clerk looked at me. She saw the dark circles under my eyes. She saw the desperation. She looked around the empty office. Then she turned her screen slightly away from the security camera and tapped a few keys. I am not supposed to see the raw logs, she whispered. But the old delivery logbook was scanned as a PDF. It is not part of the official patient file, so the hold might not have blocked it. She squinted at the screen. October 14th, 1992. Okay, here is Marilyn Russell. Admission time, 6 a.m. Delivery time. Wait, what? There is a notation here. Code pink drill. That means infant abduction or security breach, but it is crossed out. And then, she leaned closer to the screen. There is a duplicate entry. See this infant female Russell, ID number 4922, but 3 lines down, there is another entry. Infant female Doe. Transferred from ICU, ID number 4922. Same ID number I asked. That is impossible. She said, the system doesn't allow duplicates, unless someone manually overwrote it. And look at the doctor's signature on the second entry. It is illegible. Just a scribble. She looked up at me, her eyes wide. Honey, this isn't a clerical error. This looks like a switch, or a cover-up. My stomach dropped. Can you print it, I asked. No, she said, turning the screen back. I would get fired. But you saw it. Duplicate ID. Code pink. That is what you need to look for. I walked out of the hospital into the blinding sunlight, a switch, a cover-up. My phone rang. It was an unknown number. Hello, Ms. Russell Vance. A polite female voice asked. I froze. I stopped in the middle of the sidewalk, forcing a pedestrian to swerve around me. Who, I asked. Ms. Leah Russell Vance. This is the office of the Harold Vance estate. We sent you an email a few weeks ago. Yes, I said, but my name is just Russell. Why are you calling me Vance? There was a pause on the line, a shuffling of papers. My apologies. The woman said, we have recently received updated instructions regarding the legacy file. It is imperative that we speak with you in person. It concerns a bequest. A bequest? You mean money? It concerns an inheritance of information. Primarily, she said, and assets. Ms. Delling, the estate attorney, would like to meet with you immediately. Can you come to the Vance Tower in the city this afternoon? I looked at the hospital building behind me. Vance, the name on the wristband fragment. NCE. Yes, I said. I will be there. Vance Tower was a monolith of black glass in the center of Harlan City. It screamed power. It screamed untouchable. I was ushered into a conference room on the top floor. The view was dizzying. I felt like I was floating above the city, detached from the earth. A woman walked in. She was in her 60s, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my car. She had silver hair cut in a sharp bob and eyes that were intelligent and kind. Ms. Russell, she said, extending a hand. I am Cora Delling. Thank you for coming. She didn't call me Russell Vance. I sat down. Ms. Delling, I said, why did your assistant call me that name on the phone? And what does any of this have to do with me? Cora sat opposite me. She placed a single, thick envelope on the mahogany table. It was sealed with red wax, an archaic touch that felt ominous. Harold Vance passed away 4 months ago. Cora said, he was a complicated man, a brilliant man, but a man with regrets. She tapped the envelope. He left strict instructions. Upon his death, we were to locate a specific individual. We had very little to go on. A birth date, a hospital, and a set of DNA markers he had kept on file for 30 years. DNA markers, I asked. Yes. We ran a discreet search through the public genealogy databases. When you uploaded your results a few weeks ago, our system flagged a match, not for a parent, but for the markers Harold was looking for. I stared at the envelope. Is he my father? I asked. The question felt absurd. Harold Vance was 80 when he died. Cora shook her head. No, Harold Vance is not your father. Then who is he to me? Cora took a breath. He was the man who ensured you were placed. Placed, you mean adopted. I mean hidden. Cora said. She broke the wax seal. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet room. She pulled out a letter, handwritten on yellowed stationery. She didn't hand it to me. She held it. This letter references the baby from Brightstone. It details a situation that occurred in October 1992. Harold was the primary donor for the renovations of the maternity wing that year. He had significant influence over the hospital administration, and I pushed, and, Cora said, her voice lowering, he used that influence to facilitate a transfer. A baby was born to a woman who could not keep her. For reasons of safety and reputation, Harold stepped in. He arranged for that baby to be given to a couple who were desperate for a child and willing to ask no questions. Marilyn and Grant. I whispered, yes. But why the affair story, I asked. Why did they lie? Cora looked down at the letter. Because the condition of the placement was total anonymity. The biological mother was never to be contacted. The biological father was never to be known. Your parents, the Russells, were told that if they ever tried to find out the truth, or if they ever told you the truth, the baby would be taken away. I felt cold. My mother's fear. I didn't know how to tell you without losing you. She wasn't afraid of me hating her. She was afraid of them taking me. So they made up a lie. I said, a lie that destroyed our family dynamic. Just to keep the secret, fear makes people do irrational things, Cora said, and Harold Vance was a man to be feared. She slid the letter toward me. But Harold had a change of heart at the end. She said, he wrote this. He wanted you to know that you were not abandoned. You were protected, or so he believed. I picked up the letter. The handwriting was shaky. To the child who should have never paid for our fear. It began. I couldn't read past the first line. My eyes filled with tears. Who is she? I asked, looking up at Cora. My mother? Who is she? Cora hesitated. The instructions in the will are specific. I am to confirm your identity, which we have done. I am to give you this letter, and I am to tell you that there is a trust fund in your name. I don't want money. I said, my voice rising, I want a name. Harold did not include her name in the letter. Cora said gently, he protected her to the very end. But you know, don't you? I asked. You are the executor. You have the files. Cora's face was unreadable. I have a duty of confidentiality. Leah. But, she leaned forward. Harold funded the renovations. But he didn't do it alone. The Vancewell Civic Trust was a partnership. If you want to find the truth, you need to look at who else was on that board in 1992. She stood up. I have given you what I am legally authorized to give. The letter is yours. The trust is yours. But be careful. Leah, the people involved in this, they are not all dead like Harold. Some of them are very much alive, and they have a lot to lose. I took the letter. I stood up. Ms. Delling. I said, thank you. She looked at me with a mixture of pity and respect. You have the Vance chin, she said quietly. Whoever your father is, you didn't get it from him. I walked out of the tower with the letter pressed against my chest. The wind was whipping through the streets of Harlan City. I sat on a bench in the plaza and read the letter. It was vague, full of apologies and justifications about public ruin and impossible choices. It didn't give me names, but it gave me something else. It gave me validation. I wasn't a mistake. I wasn't an accident. I was a secret. A secret so dangerous that a billionaire had paid to hide me, and my parents had lived a lie for 30 years to keep me. My anger at Marilyn shifted. She wasn't the villain. She was a pawn, a terrified woman who had been handed a baby and told to keep her mouth shut or else, and Grant. He was still cruel, but his cruelty was small now. He was a petty man who had been allowed to play a big role in a play written by someone else. I looked up at the sky. Vancewell Civic Trust. That was the clue. This wasn't about proving I was good enough anymore. That desire had evaporated the moment I saw the DNA results. This was about survival. My identity had been treated like radioactive waste, buried, sealed, and marked with warning signs. Well, I was done reading the warnings. I was going to dig it up, and if the exposure burned people, if it destroyed reputations, so be it. I folded the letter and put it in my purse. I wasn't the affair child anymore. I was the evidence. And evidence always comes to light. The address for Sylvie Rook led me to a peeling beige bungalow on the outskirts of Harlan City, a neighborhood where the lawns were mostly crabgrass and the fences leaned with exhaustion. Sylvie was the name the sympathetic records clerk had whispered to me, the only nurse from the 1992 delivery rotation at Brightstone who was still alive and local. I sat in my car for 10 minutes, watching the house. I had the letter from Harold Vance in my purse, a heavy, wax-sealed accusation against the past. I had the DNA results that had severed my roots. Now, I needed the mechanic who had tightened the bolts. When I finally knocked, the woman who answered was small and bird-like, with skin the texture of crumpled tissue paper and eyes that were surprisingly sharp. She held a lit cigarette in one hand, the screen door acting as a shield between us. "Sylvie Rook," I asked. "Who is asking?" Her voice was like gravel in a mixer. "My name is Leah Russell," I said. "I was born at Brightstone Pavilion in October 1992. The cigarette froze halfway to her mouth. Her eyes dropped to my face, scanning my features with a recognition that made my skin prickle. She didn't look at me like a stranger. She looked at me like a ghost she had been expecting. "I don't talk to reporters," she said, making to close the door. "I am not a reporter," I said quickly, jamming my foot against the jamb. "I am the baby, the one from the bad month." Sylvie stopped. She looked at my foot, then back up at my face. She let out a long stream of smoke, her shoulders sagging. "You have the chin," she muttered, just like he did. "Who?" I asked. "Harold Vance." Sylvie flinched at the name. She unlocked the screen door. "Come in. But leave the door open. I want to see if anyone pulls up." The inside of the house smelled of menthol and old dust. We sat in a living room crowded with ceramic figurines. Sylvie crushed her cigarette out in an overflowing ashtray and immediately lit another. "You shouldn't be here," she said. "I need to know what happened." "Sylvie, I know about the duplicate ID numbers. I know about the reassignment." Sylvie let out a dry, hacking laugh. "Reassignment? Is that what they are calling it now? We called it the shuffle." She leaned forward, the smoke curling around her fingers. "October 92 was a bad month," she said. "The worst I ever saw in 40 years of nursing. The hospital was under construction, dust everywhere, plastic sheeting over the hallways, and the donors. They were breathing down our necks. Harold Vance was paying for the whole new wing. When a man like that says jump, the administration asks how high. "Tell me about the baby," I said. "My baby." Sylvie looked at the window, checking the street. There was a doctor. She said quietly, "Dr. Aris. He is dead now, so I suppose it doesn't matter. He was the director's favorite. He had a way of handling delicate situations. We had a patient come in, very young, very scared, and very important, or at least, connected to someone important. She looked at me. She wasn't supposed to be pregnant. That was the problem. It was a scandal waiting to happen. And in this town, money doesn't just buy houses. Honey, it buys silence. It buys history. So they took me," I asked. Sylvie shook her head. "They didn't steal you. Not exactly. The mother, she was a mess. Panicked. She signed papers she didn't read. And there was another couple, an older couple. Desperate. They had been trying for years. Multiple miscarriages. They were on the books for a private adoption. But the wait list was 5 years long. Marilyn and Grant." I said, "Doctor." Aris played matchmaker. Sylvie said, "He saw a problem, the rich girl's baby, and he saw a solution, the desperate couple. He moved the chess pieces. He told the staff it was a paper adoption, handled quietly to avoid the press. He told us if we logged it wrong, we would lose our pensions." She took a drag, her hand shaking. "We treated infants like problems to be reassigned." She whispered, "That is the sin of it. You weren't a person. You were a liability that needed to be moved from column A to column B. Did my parents know?" I asked. "Did Marilyn know I wasn't hers?" Sylvie looked at me with pity. "They knew you weren't theirs biologically," she said, "but I don't think they knew who you really were. Doctor, Aris told them the mother was a drug addict or a runaway who didn't want you. He sold them a rescue fantasy. I felt a cold knot in my stomach. A rescue fantasy. And the wristband," I asked, "the one with Vance on it." Sylvie's eyes went wide. "You have that? I found it. That was a mistake. she said. A nurse slipped up. We were supposed to cut the original bands and incinerate them. If you have that band, then the paper trail isn't as dead as they think. She stood up, signaling the interview was over. Go home. Girl, she said, you are poking a bear. Harold Vance might be dead, but the people who protected him, the people who run that trust, they are still here, and they like their secrets kept. I left Sylvie's house with more pieces of the puzzle, but the picture they formed was grotesque. I went to the public library in downtown Harlan City. I needed to see the faces. I needed to see the timeline. I spent 3 hours scrolling through digitized microfiche of the Harlan Gazette. I started with October 1992 and worked backward. I found it in the society pages from September of that year. It was a photo of the Brightstone Autumn Gala. The caption listed the attendees: Hospital Director Lawrence, Mr. Harold Vance, Dr. Aris, and local engineer Grant Russell with his wife, Marilyn. I zoomed in on the grainy black and white image. My parents were young. My mother's hair was teased high in the style of the time, and she was wearing a sequined gown that looked slightly too big for her. She looked terrified. Her smile was brittle, her eyes wide and fixed on the camera lens, as if she were waiting for a bomb to go off. And Grant looked triumphant. He was shaking Harold Vance's hand. He stood with his chest puffed out, looking like he had finally been invited to the table where the big dogs ate. They weren't strangers. They were at the gala. They were in the room with the architect of the conspiracy a month before I was born. It wasn't a random act of charity. It was a deal. I printed the photo. The graininess made them look like ghosts, but the ambition on my father's face was sharp and clear. I didn't call before I went to my parents' house this time. I didn't want to give them time to prepare a script. It was early evening. The house was quiet. I let myself in with my key, a reflex I hadn't yet unlearned. They were in the kitchen. Marilyn was chopping vegetables with a dull rhythm. Grant was reading the paper at the table. They froze when I walked in. The silence from our last encounter, the screaming match. The expulsion hung in the air like smoke. Grant lowered the paper. You have a lot of nerve coming back here, he said. I ignored him. I walked straight to the counter and placed the photo of the gala next to the cutting board. Tell me about the arrangement. Mom, I said. Marilyn looked at the photo. Her face drained of color. She put the knife down. I spoke to Sylvie Rook. I said, I know about Dr. Aris. I know about the rescue fantasy. I know you didn't cheat. Marilyn let out a sound that was half sob, half gasp. She gripped the edge of the counter. Grant stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. We do not have to discuss this. Yes, we do, I said, turning to him. Because for 32 years, you let me believe I was a badge of shame. You let me think I was the reason this family was broken. But I wasn't the reason. I was the currency. Marilyn began to cry. It was a soft, defeated weeping. We wanted a baby so badly, she whispered. I looked at her. Her pain was real, but it was small compared to the lie she had fed me. Tell me, I commanded. We tried for 6 years, Marilyn said, her voice trembling. Tests, treatments. We couldn't afford the private clinics. We were on a wait list for adoption, but they said it would be years. We were losing hope. She looked at the photo. Then Grant got the contract for the hospital parking structure. He met Dr. Aris. They started talking. Dr. Aris said sometimes situations arose. Sometimes a baby needed a home quickly. And let me guess. I said, October came around. A situation arose. Marilyn nodded. He called us in the middle of the night. He said there was a baby girl. He said the mother was a problem. He said if we took you, right then, no questions asked, the paperwork would be handled. He said it was a closed file. He said you would be ours. And you believed him. I asked. I wanted to believe him. Marilyn cried. I held you. Leah, you were so small. I thought I was saving you. I thought if we didn't take you, you would go into the system. I thought we were giving you a life. So you bought me. I said, no. Marilyn insisted. We didn't pay for you. We paid for the processing. The legal fees. You paid for silence. I said. I looked at Grant. He was watching me with a cold, detached expression. But that doesn't explain the affair story. I said. If it was an adoption, even a shady one, why not just say I was adopted? Why invent a story about infidelity? Why brand me as the affair child? Marilyn wiped her eyes. Doctor, Eris told us the biological family was powerful. He said if anyone ever looked for you, if you ever looked for them, they would take you back. He said the only way to keep you safe was to make sure you never wanted to find them. And the best way to do that was to make me think I already knew where I came from. I finished, to give me a fake biological father and a shameful origin story so I would keep my head down. Marilyn nodded. We thought it was better for you to think you were mine. Even if it meant Dad treated me like dirt, I asked. Marilyn looked at Grant. She looked helpless. Grant said it was the only story people would believe. Because you didn't look like him. I turned to my father. He hadn't spoken. He was just watching, his arms crossed. And you, I asked him, you went along with it. You let everyone think your wife cheated on you. You let everyone pity you. Grant's mouth twitched. A small, almost imperceptible smile played at the corners of his lips. It worked, didn't it? He said. I stared at him. What, it worked? He repeated, his voice calm, terrifyingly reasonable. Look at this town. Leah, look at your mother. She is weak. She wanted a baby she couldn't have. I gave her that. I paid the fees. I signed the papers. But the story. Grant, why the cruelty? He shrugged. He walked over to the window and looked out at his manicured lawn. I knew early on you weren't hers, he said casually. Even before the doctor offered the deal. I knew Marilyn couldn't carry a child. I knew she was desperate. When Eris offered the baby, I saw an opportunity for what I asked. My voice barely a whisper. To be the better man, he said. He turned back to face me. If we just adopted you, I am just a guy who adopted a kid. Normal, boring. But if I take in my wife's bastard child, if I raise the proof of her betrayal, then I am a saint. The air left the room. I stared at him, trying to comprehend the depth of the narcissism. You wanted the pity? I asked. Respect, he corrected. Not pity, respect. Every time someone looked at you, they saw my generosity. Every time you messed up, it was your bad blood. Every time I succeeded, it was despite my burden. It gave me leverage. Leah, in this marriage, in this town, I was the wronged husband. I was untouchable. I felt a physical wave of nausea. It wasn't about protecting me from the Vance family. It wasn't about saving Marilyn's feelings. He had used me as a prop for his own ego. For 32 years, every cruel comment, every cold shoulder, every time he let his friends joke about me, it was all a performance. He had harvested validation from my humiliation. And you, I said to Marilyn, you let him. Marilyn looked at the floor. I was afraid. She whispered, I was afraid he would leave. I was afraid he would tell the authorities about the illegal adoption and I would lose you. You lost me anyway. I said. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the vase that was sitting on the counter. I just felt a sudden, profound numbness. It started in my fingertips and spread to my chest, turning my heart into a block of ice. This was the breakdown. It wasn't cinematic. It wasn't loud. It was the total collapse of the scaffolding I had built my life on. I wasn't fighting for his love anymore. You cannot fight for love from a parasite. I looked at them. They looked small. They looked like strangers in a house I had never really lived in. Keep the photo. I said, it is a nice picture of the people who ruined my life. I walked out. I didn't slam the door. I closed it gently, with a definitive click that sounded like the closing of a coffin. I sat in my car in their driveway for 20 minutes. I couldn't drive. My hands were vibrating. I needed an anchor. I needed to know that I existed outside of their twisted narrative. I pulled out my phone. I opened the DNA app again. I had been refreshing it compulsively for days, hoping for a change. I refreshed the page. New match found. My breath hitched. I clicked on it. Vance. Managed by legal rep. Predicted relationship. Close family. Aunt/grandmother/half-sibling, shared DN. A 1-800 centimorgans. 1800 centimorgans. That was high. That was very high. That was a grandparent, a half-sibling, or an aunt. I clicked on the profile. No photo, no bio, just a gray silhouette and a name. E. Vance. I hit the message button. This user has disabled messaging. Contact is managed by a third-party representative. I stared at the screen. Someone was there. Someone genetically connected to me, and they were hiding behind a legal wall. My phone rang in my hand. It was Cora Delling. "Leah," she said. Her voice was urgent. "I just found a match." I said, "E. Vance, who is it?" "Listen to me," Cora said. "Do not try to contact that account." Why? Because I just received a notification from the probate court. A petition has been filed to permanently seal the entirety of Harold Vance's personal correspondence, including the letter I gave you. They are citing irreparable reputational harm and violation of medical privacy. "Who is filing it?" I asked. "The Vancewell Civic Trust," she said, "but the petitioner on the brief, it is listed as Jane Doe, acting via power of attorney." "Jane Doe," I repeated. "They are trying to erase you." "Leah," Cora said, "they know you have the letter. They know you are asking questions at the hospital. They are moving to shut this down before you can establish legal standing." I felt the numbness recede, replaced by a cold, sharp anger. Grant had used me for his ego. Marilyn had used me for her loneliness. Now this invisible family wanted to use the legal system to make me disappear. "I am done being erased." I said, "Leah, be careful." Cora warned, "This is a massive legal machine. They can bankrupt you. They can destroy your career." "I don't care," I said. I hung up. I looked at the locked profile of E. Vance. I wasn't going to wait for them to open the door. I was going to kick it down. I started the engine. I wasn't going home. I was going to the Hall of Records. I knew it was late. I knew the office was closed. But I needed to be there first thing in the morning. I was going to file a petition of my own. I was going to file for the unsealing of my original birth certificate. In this state, it required a court order for closed adoptions, especially ones with irregularities. It would trigger a notification to the birth parents. It would alert the Vancewell Trust. It would act as a flare gun fired into the middle of their silent, expensive peace. I drove toward the city lights. The numbness was gone. In its place was a clarity I had never felt before. My father's cruelty had been about control. He had controlled the narrative. Now, I was taking the pen. I thought about the E in E. Vance, Elizabeth Eleanor Evelyn, whoever she was. She was hiding, and I was coming to find her. I pulled into the parking lot near the courthouse and reclined my seat. I would sleep in the car. I wanted to be the first person in line when the doors opened at 8 o'clock. As I closed my eyes, I thought of Marilyn's weeping and Grant's smug smile. I thought of the bad month at Brightstone. Problems to be reassigned. I wasn't a problem anymore. I was a plaintiff. The notification didn't come in the mail. It came via a process server. A bored-looking man in a windbreaker who intercepted me as I was leaving my apartment building at 7 in the morning. He shoved a thick manila envelope into my chest, mumbled a name that might have been mine, and vanished into the gray morning mist of Harlan City. I stood on the sidewalk, the envelope heavy in my hands. The return address was embossed in gold, a stark contrast to the cheap paper of the summons itself, Vancewell Civic Trust, Legal Division. I tore it open right there, oblivious to the commuters rushing past me, motion to intervene and motion for protective order. The legal language was dense, designed to intimidate, but the message was clear. The Vancewell Civic Trust, the charitable arm of the Vance Empire, the people who built libraries and funded hospital wings, was stepping in to block my request for my own birth records. They weren't claiming I wasn't the baby. They were claiming that releasing the unredacted file would violate third-party medical privacy rights and cause undue reputational distress to non-parties. They were suing to keep me a secret. I felt a cold spike of adrenaline. Up until this moment, I had been fighting ghosts. I had been fighting the memory of Dr. Aris and the silence of my parents. Now, the ghost had a legal team. I called Cora Delling immediately. "I cannot represent you in this." "Leah," she said, her voice regretful. "I represent the estate of Harold Vance. The trust is a separate entity. They are arguing that Harold's letter and the hospital records are distinct from the estate's assets. They are circling the wagons." "Who do I call?" I asked. "Who fights a billion-dollar foundation?" "I have a name," she said. "Miles Arden. He is not corporate. He is abrasive, but he hates institutional overreach more than he likes money." Miles Arden's office was located above a Thai restaurant in a neighborhood that hadn't gentrified yet. The air in the stairwell smelled of lemongrass and old carpet when I walked in. Miles was throwing a stress ball against the wall with a rhythmic, violent thud, thud, thud. He was younger than I expected, maybe late 30s, with hair that looked like he had cut it himself in the dark and a suit that had seen better decades. "So you are the ghost baby," he said, not getting up. "I am Leah Russell," I corrected. Sitting in the chair opposite him, it wobbled. "Right, the Russell girl who isn't a Russell, and now the Vancewell Trust has dropped a motion on you that weighs more than a brick." He caught the ball and finally looked at me. His eyes were tired, but sharp. "Do you know what you are doing?" he asked. "I am trying to get my birth certificate." I said. "No," Miles said. "You are trying to pry open a vault that has been sealed for 30 years by people who have enough money to buy the judge, the courthouse, and the land it sits on. This isn't a records request, Leah. It is a siege." I handed him the motion. "Can we win?" Miles flipped through the pages. He didn't read them. He scanned them like he was looking for a scent. "They are using the privacy shield," he muttered. "Classic. They will argue that the biological mother's right to anonymity supersedes your right to identity. They will paint you as unstable, greedy, a gold digger looking for a payout from the Vance fortune." "I don't want their money." I said. "It doesn't matter what you want," Miles said. "It matters what they can make the court believe you want. They will dig into your life, your job, your dating history, your relationship with your parents. They will try to prove that you are emotionally compromised and that this quest is just a desperate cry for attention." He tossed the paperwork onto his desk. "If we do this, it is going to get ugly. They will not play fair. They will try to break you before we ever get to a hearing." I looked at the peeling paint on his wall. I thought about the wristband in my kitchen drawer. I thought about Grant Russell's smirk when he told me my humiliation had bought him respect. "I am already broken." "Miles," I said, "I just want to know who broke me." Miles smiled. It was a shark's smile, all teeth and opportunity. "All right then," he said. "Let's go poke the bear." The backlash from the family was immediate and coordinated. I assumed Grant had made phone calls. He was good at that, marshalling the troops, framing the narrative before the enemy could speak. It started with Aunt Linda, my mother's sister. She had always been the one who knit me sweaters and remembered my birthday. I picked up her call expecting comfort. "Leah, what are you doing to your mother?" she demanded. Her voice wasn't warm. It was brittle with judgment. "I am not doing anything to Mom." I said, "I am looking for the truth. The truth." "You are destroying her," Linda shouted. "After everything she did for you, she took you in. She raised you, and now you are dragging her name through the mud, digging up things that were buried for a reason. She lied to me. Linda, for 32 years. She protected you," Linda snapped. "And this is how you repay her, by hiring lawyers, by attacking the family. You are being selfish. Leah, just like Grant always said, you are so focused on yourself you do not care who you hurt." I hung up. My hands were shaking. Just like Grant always said. That was the knife twist. Grant had spent decades painting me as difficult, moody, and other. Now, the family was falling back on that established script because it was easier than facing the reality that Grant was a monster and Marilyn was an accomplice. It was easier to blame the ungrateful daughter than to dismantle the family myth. I was the scapegoat, I had always been the scapegoat. The DNA results hadn't changed that. They had only intensified it. I blocked Linda's number. Then I blocked my cousins. I watched my contact list shrink, name by name, isolating myself before they could do it for me. 2 days later, Marilyn showed up at my apartment. I almost didn't let her in. I watched her through the peephole. She looked small, wrapped in a trench coat that seemed to swallow her. She wasn't ringing the bell. She was just standing there, staring at the wood grain. I opened the door. "Mom," I said, "I am not stopping the lawsuit." "I know," she whispered. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside. She walked into my living room and stood awkwardly in the center of the rug, clutching her purse. She looked around as if she had never been there before. "Your aunt called me. She said you blocked her. She was screaming at me." I said, "She thinks she is helping." Marilyn said weakly, "She is helping Dad." I corrected, "She is helping the lie." Marilyn flinched. She sat down on the edge of the sofa, keeping her coat on. "I came to tell you," she started, then stopped. She took a breath that rattled in her chest. "I came to tell you that you are right about the papers." "What papers?" "The adoption papers," she said. "The ones Dr. Aris gave us." I walked over and sat in the armchair opposite her. "What about them? I told you I signed them." She said, "But I didn't tell you what he said when I signed them." She looked at me, her eyes watery and red-rimmed. "He told me the mother didn't want you, Leah." He looked me in the eye and said, "The girl is young, she is in trouble, and she wants this problem gone." He used that word, problem. "And you believed him." "I wanted a baby," Marilyn said. Her voice cracked, and he made it sound like if we didn't take you, you would be discarded. He made me feel like a savior. But the papers... She reached into her purse and pulled out a photocopy. It was grainy, the text barely legible. "I found this in the safe," she said. "I made a copy before Grant locked everything away. Look at the bottom." I took the paper. It was a transfer of custody form, dated October 16th, 1992. It was filled with medical jargon, but at the bottom, there was a signature block for the biological mother. It was signed Jane Doe, but underneath that, in tiny print, there was a witness line, witnessed by A. Vanswell. I stared at the name, A. Vanswell. "Who is A. Vanswell?" I asked. "I don't know," Marilyn said. "But look at the date of the witness signature." I looked, October 12th, 1992, 2 days before I was born. They signed the papers before I was even here. I whispered. Marilyn nodded, tears spilling over. "They didn't wait to see if she wanted you. They decided you were going to be moved before you took your first breath. It wasn't an adoption, Leah, it was a transaction." She looked up at me, and for the first time, I saw something other than fear in her eyes. I saw guilt, a deep, corroding guilt. "I didn't know that part," she said. "I swear. I thought she had signed it after. I didn't look at the dates until yesterday." "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "This helps my case. This hurts Dad." Marilyn looked at her hands. "Because Grant told me to burn it," she said softly. "He told me to destroy the file. And for the first time in 30 years, I said no." She stood up, trembling. "I cannot be your mother anymore, Leah. I know that. I lost that right when I let him treat you the way he did. But I can be a witness." She placed the paper on the coffee table. "Be careful," she said. "Please, these people, they made Grant afraid. And Grant isn't afraid of anything." I took the name A. Vanswell to Miles Arden. We sat in his office, surrounded by stacks of case law. Miles looked at the document Marilyn had given me. "This is gold," he said. "Pre-signed custody transfer. That proves intent to deceive. It proves the biological mother wasn't given a cooling-off period. It might even prove she was coerced." "Who is A. Vanswell?" I asked. Miles tapped his keyboard. He pulled up a corporate hierarchy chart for the Vanswell Civic Trust. "Here," he said, pointing to a face in the second row of executives. "Arthur Vanswell. He is a cousin of Harold Vance. In 1992, he was the hospital administrator at Brightstone. He was the administrator I asked. And now he is the vice president of operations for the trust, Miles said. He failed upward. Wait, I said, remembering something Sylvie Rook had told me. There was an investigation. Sylvie said the Dr. Eris, faced an internal investigation years later that vanished. Miles typed furiously. Eris, malpractice, 1995. Nothing, he said. The records are scrubbed. But let's look at Arthur Vancewell's employment history. He pulled up an old LinkedIn profile. 1990 to 1994 administrator. Brightstone Pavilion, 1995 to present executive board. Vancewell Civic Trust. He left the hospital right after the investigation into Eris would have happened. Miles noted, he moved from the hospital to the foundation that funds the hospital. He buried the body, and they gave him a corner office. So Arthur Vancewell knows. I said, he doesn't just know. Miles said, he signed the witness line. He was in the room. He is the link between the hospital and the money. Miles leaned back. We need to depose him, he said. The trust will fight it tooth and nail. They will claim he is too high level, that he has no relevant knowledge. But this signature, this puts him in the room. I left Miles's office feeling a strange mix of vindication and dread. The net was tightening. But every time I pulled a thread, the knot got bigger. I was unlocking my car when I heard a voice behind me. Leah. I spun around. It was Paige. My sister, my half-sister, was standing near a parking meter, wearing her scrubs. She was a pediatric nurse, the good daughter who had followed the path Grant Russell had laid out. We hadn't spoken since the retirement dinner. Paige, I said, guarding myself, if you are here to tell me I am ruining the family, save it. Aunt Linda already covered that. Paige shook her head. She looked exhausted. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she wasn't wearing makeup. I am not here for Dad, she said. She walked closer, stopping a few feet away. I heard about the lawsuit. She said, Dad is losing his mind. He is tearing the house apart looking for files. He is screaming at Mom. I am sorry Mom is caught in the middle. I said, but I am not sorry for what I'm doing. I know. Paige said. She looked down at her sneakers. I always knew. Leah knew that the story was bullshit. She said. I stared at her. What the affair story? She said. It never made sense. Dad is a narcissist. We both know that. But he is also a prude. He cares too much about what people think. The idea that he would stay with a cheating wife, that he would raise another man's kid out of decency. No. He would have divorced Mom and taken everything she had. So you knew, I asked, my voice rising. You knew and you didn't say anything I didn't know for sure. Paige said, I just knew the vibe was off. I saw how he looked at you. It wasn't anger. Leah, it was ownership. He looked at you like you were a trophy he had bought at a discount store. She looked up, and her eyes were fierce. I hated it, she said. I hated how he used you to make me feel small. Look at Leah. She is the mistake. But look how good I am to her. You better be perfect, Paige, or you are just ungrateful. He used me to control you too, I asked. He used you to control everyone. Paige said, you were the boogeyman. You were the warning of what happens when women stray. She took a step closer. I am done. Leah, I am done watching him play the victim. If you need someone to testify, if you need someone to stand up in court and say that Grant Russell is a liar who used a child as a human shield, I will do it. I looked at her. For years, I had resented Paige. I thought she was the golden child, the one who got the love I was denied. Now I saw that she had been in the same prison, just in a different cell. Thank you, I whispered. She reached out and squeezed my arm. Her grip was strong. Burn him down. Leah, she said, burn it all down. The high of Paige's defection lasted exactly 4 hours. At 8 o'clock that night, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. Subject 4th floor. I opened the message. It was a photo. It was a picture of the entrance to my apartment building. It was taken from across the street. At night, I could see the glow of the lobby lights. I could see the doorman's silhouette. Then a second photo loaded. It was a picture of my mailbox in the lobby. The name tag L. Russell was clearly visible. Then a third text. Some secrets are load-bearing. Pull them out, and the roof falls on your head. Drop the suit. I stared at the screen, my blood turning to slush. This wasn't a legal threat. This wasn't a family guilt trip. This was a physical threat. They knew where I lived. They had been in my lobby. I called Miles. "Save the photos," he said, his voice hard. "Do not delete them. Send them to me." "Who is it?" I asked. "The trust, or someone they hired." Miles said, "This is how they play. Leah, they want you scared. They want you looking over your shoulder so you stop looking at the records. I am scared." "Miles, good," he said. "Being scared keeps you alert. But do not stop. If we stop now, they win. And if they win, you will never be safe. You will just be silent." I locked my door. I put a chair under the handle. I closed the blinds. I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark, watching the city lights, wondering which one of them was watching me back. The court hearing for the preliminary injunction was 2 weeks later. It was a closed session. Just the lawyers and the judge. I wasn't allowed inside. I had to wait in the hallway, pacing back and forth on the marble floor until my heels clicked a hole in my patience. When the doors finally opened, Miles walked out. He looked disheveled, his tie crooked, but he was grinning. "We got it," I asked. "We got a slice," he said. He led me to a bench away from the prying ears of the clerks. "The judge is skeptical of the trust's privacy claims," Miles explained. "He didn't grant the full unsealing yet. He wants to review the reputational harm argument, but he granted a limited discovery order for the non-identifying administrative logs from Brightstone." "What does that mean?" "It means we got the hospital's internal ledger for October 1992. Not the patient names, just the numbers." He pulled a tablet out of his briefcase. "Look at this," he said. He pulled up a spreadsheet. It was a digital scan of an old ledger. October 14th, 1992, 04:15 a.m., patient ID 4922, status admitted. He scrolled down. October 14th, 1992, 06:30 a.m., patient ID 4922, status transferred, NICU. He scrolled down again. October 16th, 1992, 9 a.m., patient ID 4922, status discharged. "Okay," I said. "That looks normal." "Keep looking," Miles said. "Look at the next line. October 16th, 1992, 9:15 a.m., patient ID 4922, status reassigned. New ID 4928. Reassigned," I asked. "It gets better," Miles said. October 16th, 1992, 10 a.m., patient ID 4928, status discharged to Russell. Miles looked at me. "Your ID number was used twice. Once for the baby that was discharged at 9 a.m., and then 15 minutes later, that same ID was reassigned to a new number and discharged to your parents. 2 babies," I asked, "or 1 baby moved between 2 files?" Miles said, "But here's the kicker, the first discharge. The one at 9 a.m., it wasn't to a parent. It was logged as status administrative hold. They put me in a holding pattern." I said, "They scrubbed you," Miles corrected. "For 45 minutes. You didn't exist in the system. You were just a number being wiped clean so you could be re-entered as a Russell." "This proves the switch," I said. "It proves the hospital falsified records," Miles said. "And that gives us the leverage we need to demand the unmasking of the original ID. The judge cannot ignore fraud. Privacy rights do not cover criminal conspiracy." We were celebrating the small victory with bad coffee in the courthouse cafeteria when Cora Delling appeared. She looked out of place among the tired public defenders and anxious defendants. "Ms. Russell," she said. "Mr. Arden, Cora." I said, "Did you hear?" I heard the trust took a hit, she said. She sat down, smoothing her skirt. That makes my job slightly easier. She reached into her briefcase. The court order regarding Harold's letter is still pending, she said. But I have a duty to the beneficiary, that is you, to ensure you understand the context of the bequest. I cannot give you the whole letter until the judge rules, but I can show you the excerpt that the trust is trying so hard to redact. She slid a piece of paper across the table. It was a photocopy of a single paragraph. Blown up. The decision was not made out of malice, but out of a desperate need to prevent public ruin. The family involved was not merely prominent. They were the bedrock of the party and the state. A child born out of wedlock to her would have collapsed the merger and destroyed the Senate bid. We did what we thought was necessary. We removed the obstacle, but I have carried the weight of that removal every day. Leah is the child who should have never paid for our fear. I read it twice. The Senate bid. I looked up at Cora. Who ran for Senate in 1992, I asked. Cora didn't answer. She just looked at me with those intelligent, sad eyes. Harold Vance was a kingmaker. Leah, she said, he didn't just build hospitals, he built careers. She stood up. I didn't show you that, she said. She walked away. I sat there, the words Senate bid burning into my retinas. This wasn't just about a rich girl in trouble. This was political. This was about power at the highest level. The family involved was the bedrock. I felt a sudden, crushing weight. I was fighting a trust. I was fighting my father. And now, I realized I was fighting a political dynasty. Miles picked up the paper. Senate bid. He whistled low. Well, that narrows the field. He looked at me. You realize what this means, right? If we win, if we expose this, we aren't just finding your mom. We are potentially blowing up a political legacy. I thought about Marilyn. I thought about how she had been coerced. I thought about the E. Vance account that was locked down. I thought about the fear that had ruled my life. I looked at Miles. I don't care about their legacy. I said, I want my name. But as I said it, I felt a flicker of doubt. Marilyn was terrified. Paige was angry. Grant was cornered. And I was standing in the middle of a minefield, holding a match. I wanted to burn it down. I did. But I was beginning to realize that the fire wouldn't just burn the villains. It would burn everything. I looked at the photo of my apartment entrance on my phone. Load-bearing secrets. Let the roof fall. I thought, I will stand in the rubble if I have to. But I will not stand in the dark. The lead on Dana Pell came from the bottom of a digitized payroll manifest Miles Arden had subpoenaed. She wasn't a nurse. She was a social worker, listed in the 1992 personnel files as a patient liaison. Her employment had terminated abruptly 2 weeks after my birth. I found her working in a community garden in the South District, kneeling in the dirt, aggressively pulling weeds from a bed of marigolds. She was a sturdy woman with gray hair chopped short and hands that looked like they had done a lifetime of hard labor. Dana Pell. I asked from the garden gate. She didn't look up. If you're selling solar panels, I am not interested. And if you are from the city council about the water permit, tell them to shove it. I am not from the council. I said, I am Leah Russell. I was born at Brightstone Pavilion in October 1992. Dana stopped pulling. Her hands hovered over the dirt. She stayed that way for a long moment, a statue of hesitation, before she slowly rocked back on her heels and wiped her forehead with the back of a muddy glove. I wondered if one of you would ever find me, she said. Her voice was flat, resigned. One of who I asked. The ghosts, she said. She stood up, dusting off her knees. We walked to a weathered picnic table in the shade of a dying oak tree. She didn't offer me water. She just looked at me with a gaze that was clinical, assessing the damage. You want to know about the pipeline, she said. It wasn't a question. I want to know how I was erased. I said. Dana nodded. It wasn't as sophisticated as you probably think. It was just paperwork. Boring, bureaucratic paperwork. That is how the rich get away with things. They do not use guns. They use filing cabinets. Tell me. I said, I was 24. Dana began. Fresh out of grad school. I thought I was there to help indigent mothers. But Brightstone was different. It was where the wealthy went to have their problems handled. She looked at the garden. Her jaw set. There was a system, she said. We called it the Private Placement Protocol. Officially, it didn't exist. But unofficially, if a donor or a board member had a daughter in trouble, a pregnancy that would ruin a debutante season, or a political campaign doctor, Aris would initiate the protocol. How did it work? I asked. Pseudonyms, Dana said. The mother would be admitted under a fake name, Jane Doe, Mary Smith, but the billing went to a blind trust. The baby would be born, and then nothing. Nothing. The baby wouldn't be discharged. She explained. The mother would leave, usually out the back entrance in a private car, but the baby's file would be marked, still transferred. It is a dummy status. It means the patient is neither here nor there. It creates a limbo, a gap in the timeline where the identity can be swapped. And that is when I became Leah Russell. I said, Dana looked at me. You were never supposed to be Leah Russell. You were supposed to be a closed adoption out of state. That was the usual route. But something happened that week. The intended adoptive family backed out, or the timeline got crunched. They needed a local fix, fast. So they found my parents. I said, they found a couple who were desperate enough not to ask questions. Dana corrected. I saw the paperwork cross my desk. The birth mother's surrender form was blank. No name. Just a signature from a witness. I went to Dr. Aris. I told him it was illegal. I told him we were trafficking children. What did he say? He told me that I could be a team player, or I could be unemployed. Dana said, he said, these families are the pillars of the community. We are protecting their futures. I quit the next day. She looked at me, her eyes hard. I am sorry. She said, not for quitting, but for not burning the place down on my way out. I knew they were erasing you. I knew they were turning a person into a problem to be solved, and I just walked away. I reached into my bag and pulled out the photo of the wristband. Do you know who she was? I asked. The mother Dana shook her head. I never met her. They kept her in the VIP suite on the 4th floor. Security guard at the door. No social workers allowed. But I saw the intake log before they scrubbed it. She leaned in, lowering her voice. She was young, maybe 19, and she wasn't alone. There was an older man with her, not the father of the baby. Her father? He was the one giving the orders. Harold Vance, I asked. No, Dana said. Harold Vance was the money. This man was the power. I didn't get a name, but on the intake form, under emergency contact, there was a reference to a property. Highland Gate. I froze. Highland Gate was the name of the governor's mansion, or at least, the historic estate that had been in the family of the current senator for 3 generations. The information from Dana gave Miles the leverage he needed. He filed an emergency motion arguing that the still transferred status was evidence of fraud, which pierced the privacy veil. The judge, a stern woman who seemed increasingly annoyed by the trust's obstructionism, granted us a keyhole peek. We were allowed to view one unredacted line from the original admission log. Under strict confidentiality, we couldn't publish it, we couldn't leak it, but we could use it to pursue the next lead. We stood in the judge's chambers as the clerk handed Miles a single sheet of paper. Miles read it. His eyebrows shot up. He handed it to me. Patient name, Eleanor Vance. Admitted, October 14th, 1992. Guarantor, the Vancewell Trust. Eleanor E. Vance. The name clicked into place like a heavy bolt. Eleanor Vance wasn't a public figure. The Vance family had always been private about the women, focusing the spotlight on the men Harold, his sons, his nephews. Eleanor was a ghost in the society pages, but she was real, and she was my mother. We sent a formal letter to the legal representation listed for Eleanor Vance. It wasn't a lawsuit. It was an inquiry. I know who I am. I know who you are. I want to talk. The response came 48 hours later. It wasn't a letter. It was a courier delivering a thick packet to Miles's office. We sat in the conference room and opened it. Inside, there was a document titled Settlement and Non-Disclosure Agreement, and a check. I stared at the number on the check. $500,000. $500,000. $500,000. The letter accompanying it was brief, written by a lawyer I had never heard of. Dear Ms. Russell, our client wishes to resolve this matter with finality. While she denies any legal or biological relationship, she recognizes the distress you have suffered due to the confusion of the historical record. This sum is offered as a gesture of goodwill to assist in your closure. Acceptance of these funds requires the immediate withdrawal of all legal actions and the execution of the attached NDA, prohibiting you from ever claiming a connection to the Vance family or Vancewell Trust. This offer expires in 24 hours. I felt the blood roaring in my ears. The room seemed to tilt. They were trying to buy me, again, 32 years ago. They paid for my processing with a donation to the hospital. Now, they were paying for my silence with a check. The amount had gone up, but the principle was exactly the same. I was a transaction. I picked up the check. My hands were trembling, not with greed, but with a rage so pure it felt like it could melt the paper. They think I am a problem they can budget for. I whispered, "It is a lot of money." "Leah," Miles said quietly. He wasn't pushing me to take it. He was just doing his job, ensuring I saw the reality. "That pays off your student loans. That buys a house. It buys my name." I said, "It buys my right to say I exist." I ripped the check in half. Then I ripped the halves. I kept ripping until the heavy, expensive paper was nothing but confetti on the conference table. "Tell them no." I said, "Tell them I do not want their goodwill, and tell them if they ever insult me like this again, the price goes up. The price becomes their reputation." The rejection of the money must have sent shockwaves through the system, because the next day, the pressure shifted from legal to personal. I was walking to my car after work when I saw him. Grant Russell was leaning against the hood of my sedan. He looked older than he had at the retirement dinner. His posture, usually rigid with self-importance, was slumped. He saw me and straightened up, adjusting his tie. "Leah," he said, "what do you want?" "Grant," I asked. I didn't call him Dad. I couldn't. "We need to talk," he said. I tried to walk past him to the driver's side door. "My lawyer says I shouldn't talk to you. Your lawyer isn't your father," Grant snapped. Then he caught himself. He softened his voice, a performance I recognized from 1,000 heart-to-heart lectures growing up. "Leah, please, your mother is sick. She is not sleeping. This lawsuit, it is killing her. You are killing her." I said, "You and the lies you forced her to keep." Grant sighed. "Look, I know we have had our differences. I know I was hard on you." "Hard on me?" I laughed, a bitter, sharp sound. "You called me a mistake for 3 decades. You let your friends mock me. You made me feel like I was dirt on your shoe. I was trying to toughen you up." He lied. "The world is a hard place, Leah, especially for someone with your background." "My background? You mean the background you invented?" He waved a hand dismissively. "It doesn't matter now. What matters is the family, the Russells. We have a reputation in this town. This court case, it is embarrassing. People are talking. That is what you care about." I said, "People talking. I am offering you an olive branch. Leah." He took a step closer. "If you drop the suit, if you stop digging into the Vances, I will make a statement, a public one. I will say that I was wrong to joke about the affair. I will say that you are my daughter in every way that counts. I will give you the validation you have always wanted." I stared at him. He really didn't get it. He thought his approval was still the currency I traded in. He thought he could barter his love for my silence. "You think I want your apology?" I asked quietly. "It is what you have been chasing your whole life, isn't it?" Grant said, a smug confidence returning to his eyes. "You just want Daddy to say he's proud of you. Well, I am offering it. Just stop this nonsense. Stop trying to be a Vance. You are a Russell. You are my burden." Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a loud snap. It was the sound of the last tether breaking. I am not your burden, Grant, I said, and I am not your daughter. I am the evidence of a crime you helped cover up. Grant's face darkened. The soft, manipulative mask fell away, revealing the ugly, jagged resentment underneath. You stupid girl, he hissed. You ungrateful, stupid girl. I gave you a name. I gave you a roof, and this is how you repay me by exposing us. I am exposing the truth. The truth, he shouted. The truth is that you were unwanted. You were trash that got thrown out the back door of a hospital. And I was the one who picked you up. You ruined my marriage. You ruined my life. Every day, I looked at you. I was reminded that I had to clean up someone else's mess just to get a contract. There it was, the raw, unfiltered truth. I wasn't a child to him. I was the cost of doing business. I was a fee he had paid to get a construction contract. I didn't flinch. I let his words hit me. They didn't hurt anymore. They just clarified things. You are a small man. Grant, I said. He lunged at me. I don't think he intended to hit me. Maybe just to grab my arm, to shake me into submission like he used to when I was 10. But he never made contact. A figure stepped between us. It was Paige. I hadn't seen her approach. She must have been waiting in her car nearby. She was wearing her scrubs, and she looked tired. But she stood like a wall of concrete. She didn't push him. She just occupied the space, forcing him to step back. Don't touch her, Paige said. Her voice was low, devoid of emotion. Grant looked at her, shocked. Paige, get out of the way. I am talking to your sister. She isn't listening to you anymore. Dad, Paige said, and neither am I. Grant looked between us, his 2 daughters, the one he had tormented and the one he had tried to mold into perfection, both of them staring at him with absolute, cold detachment. You are choosing her, Grant spat. Over me. Over your family. She is my family, Paige said. You are just the guy who lives in Mom's house. Grant opened his mouth to speak, to rage, to assert his dominance, but he looked at Paige's face, then at mine, and he saw that he had no power left. His leverage was gone. The script had been burned. He made a noise of disgust, turned on his heel, and marched back to his car. Paige watched him go. She didn't shake. She didn't cry. She just turned to me. Are you okay? She asked. I nodded. I felt lighter than I had in years. Thank you, I said. She shrugged. I didn't do it for you. I did it because I'm sick of the noise. It wasn't a hug. It wasn't a dramatic reconciliation. It was better. It was respect. I went to see Marilyn the next day. Grant was at the country club, brooding. Marilyn was in the sunroom again. But she wasn't gardening. She was just sitting in a wicker chair, staring at the dust motes dancing in the light. She looked at me when I entered. He told me what happened, she said. He said you refused the apology. It wasn't an apology. Mom, it was a bribe. Marilyn nodded slowly. I know. I sat down across from her. Why? Mom, I asked. Not the adoption. I understand that now. You were desperate, but the silence. When I was growing up, when I was crying in my room because he wouldn't look at me, why didn't you tell me then? Marilyn closed her eyes. Because I thought you needed a story, she whispered. Children need to know who they are. I thought a cruel story was better than no story at all. What does that mean? I thought if I told you the truth that you were a secret, that your real parents gave you away like a parcel, you would feel untethered, like you didn't belong to the earth. So I let Grant tell the affair story. At least in that story, you had a mother who wanted you enough to sin for you. Even if it was a lie, it felt stable. I looked at her, understanding the tragic, twisted logic. She had confused stability with silence. She thought a defined role, even a painful one like the mistake, was better than the void of the unknown. You were wrong, I said. I know, she said. I see that now. The truth hurts. Leah. But the lie rotted us from the inside out. She reached out and took my hand. Her fingers were cold. I am testifying, she said. What Miles called me. He needs me to confirm the date on the custody papers. He needs me to say, on the record, that doctor, Aris coerced me. You don't have to. I said, it will destroy your standing in this town. The ladies at the club. Screw the club, Marilyn said. It was the first time I had ever heard her curse. She squeezed my hand. I let him hurt you for 30 years to protect my own comfort. I can take a little embarrassment now. Let them talk. I am done being quiet. The final piece of the puzzle came from Cora Delling. 2 days before the decisive hearing, she asked me to meet her at the cemetery. It was a melodramatic setting, but Cora was a woman of tradition. We stood before the Vance family mausoleum, a marble temple that looked big enough to live in. Harold is in there, she said, gesturing to the heavy bronze doors. Why are we here, Cora? Because the judge is going to rule on the letter tomorrow, she said, and regardless of the legal outcome, you need to know the moral truth. She pulled a folded piece of paper from her pocket. This is the full text of the letter, she said. I am not giving it to you. I am reading it to you, as a friend, not a lawyer. She put on her reading glasses. My dearest Eleanor. The letter began. I frowned. It wasn't addressed to me. My dearest Eleanor, I did what you asked. The child is safe. She is with a family that will keep her hidden. But I write this so that one day, if you find the strength to look for her, you will know that I did not do this to save my reputation. I did it to save yours. I loved you too much to watch you be destroyed by a world that would never understand our mistake. I have become the villain of this story, so you could remain the saint. Forgive me. Cora lowered the paper. Harold didn't write the letter to you. Leah, he wrote it to Eleanor. His niece, I asked. Harold Vance raised Eleanor after her parents died. Cora said, he loved her like a daughter, and when she got pregnant at 19, by a man who was entirely unsuitable. Harold intervened. He orchestrated the cover-up to protect her. I said, yes, but read between the lines. Leah, a world that would never understand our mistake. She looked at me pointedly. Harold wasn't just protecting her from a scandal. He was protecting her from the reality that he had failed her. He controlled her life. He controlled her choices. And when she made a mistake, he erased it. Just like Grant. I realized Grant used the affair story to control Marilyn. Harold used the adoption cover-up to control Eleanor. Two powerful men, rewriting history to suit their own narratives, using women and children as ink. It wasn't love, I said. It was possession. Cora nodded. Perhaps. But Harold regretted it. That is why he left the DNA markers. That is why he wanted you found. He knew he had stolen something that wasn't his. She put the letter back in her pocket. Tomorrow. The judge decides if the world gets to know. But now you know. You weren't abandoned because you were unlovable. You were hidden because you were inconvenient to a man's vision of perfection. The night before the hearing, Miles came to my apartment. He brought a tripod and a professional camera. What is this? I asked. The judge agreed to accept a personal victim impact statement. He said, in camera, meaning, just for her eyes. She wants to hear from you. Leah, not through a lawyer, not through a brief. She wants to know why you are fighting this. He set up the camera. He checked the lighting. Just talk, he said. Tell her the truth. I sat on my sofa. I looked into the black lens. I thought about the wristband. I thought about Grant's face when he called me a mistake. I thought about the check for $500,000. I took a breath. My name is Leah Russell. I began. At least, that is the name on my driver's license. For 32 years. I was told that my name meant shame. I was told I was the result of a betrayal. I carried that weight. I let it define me. I let it make me small. I looked straight into the lens. Now, I know that was a lie. But the truth I found is not a happy ending. I found out that I was a transaction. I was moved from one column to another to balance a ledger of reputation. The people who made me and the people who raised me decided that their comfort was worth more than my identity. I leaned forward. The Vancewell Trust says that unsealing these records will cause harm. They say it will ruin reputations. They say the past should stay buried, but I am not the past. I am right here. I am a living, breathing person who has been gaslit since the day I was born. I am not seeking revenge. I am not asking for their money. I ripped up their check. I am seeking the right to my own history. I have the right to know who I am when I look in the mirror. I have the right to know that I exist, not as an error in a logbook, but as a human being. Justice isn't about punishment, it is about accuracy. And for 32 years, my life has been a typo. I am asking you to correct the record. I stopped. Miles turned off the camera. He didn't say anything. He just nodded. We were ready. The chess match was over. It was time to flip the board. The courtroom was surprisingly small for a place where my entire existence was being debated. It was room 3B, a windowless box with wood paneling that smelled of old varnish and floor wax. On the left side, the legal team for the Vanswell Civic Trust sat in a phalanx of navy blue suits. There were 4 of them, their briefcases made of leather that probably cost more than my car. On the right side sat Miles Arden and me. Miles was wearing the same suit he had worn to every meeting, the one with the slightly frayed cuff. He tapped his pen against the table, a frantic, staccato rhythm that betrayed his calm expression. The trust's lead attorney, a man named Mr. Sterling, who looked like he had been manufactured rather than born, stood up to address the judge. "Your Honor," he began, his voice smooth and resonant, "this petition is a fishing expedition. Ms. Russell is a young woman who has unfortunately become estranged from her family. While that is a tragedy, it is not a legal basis to pierce the veil of privacy that protects the patients of Brightstone Pavilion." He gestured toward me without looking at me. "We have evidence that Ms. Russell is currently in financial distress. She has student loans. She rents her apartment. It is the position of the trust that this sudden interest in unsealing 30-year-old records is not about identity, but about inheritance. She is looking for a payday. Your Honor, she is chasing a ghost in hopes that it drops gold coins." I gripped the edge of the table. The narrative was shifting again. First, I was the affair child. Then I was the mistake. Now, I was the gold digger. It seemed the world would invent any story to avoid calling me a victim. Miles stood up. He didn't smooth his voice. He sounded tired and angry. "Your Honor," he said, "my client tore up a check for $500,000 3 days ago. If she were looking for a payday, she would be on a beach in Mexico right now. She is here because the Vanswell Trust offered her money to stay silent, and she chose the truth instead." Sterling jumped up. "Objection. Settlement negotiations are privileged." "They are relevant to motive," Miles shouted back. "And as for the records, this isn't about privacy. We have submitted Exhibit A, the hospital ledger from October 14th, 1992. Miles held up the tablet. "We have a patient ID number that was issued, retracted, and reassigned within 48 hours. We have a still transferred status that does not exist in medical coding. We have a witness signature from Arthur Vanswell on a custody transfer dated 2 days before the child was born. This isn't a hospital maintaining privacy. Your Honor, this is a corporation covering up a fraud." The judge, a woman named Justice Halloway with steel gray hair and reading glasses perched on the end of her nose, looked at the documents. She flipped through the ledger pages Miles had submitted. She looked at the motion from the trust. Then she looked at me. "Ms. Russell," she said, "you are asking this court to unseal records that involve third parties who have not consented to be named. I am asking to know who I am." "Your Honor," I said. My voice didn't shake. I had practiced this in front of the camera. "I am asking for the one thing everyone in this room has, except for me, a history." Justice Halloway nodded slowly. She turned to Sterling. "Mr. Sterling, you claim that the sealed letter from the late Harold Vance contains privileged attorney-client communication." "Yes, Your Honor. And yet," Sterling continued, "the plaintiff possesses an excerpt given to her by the estate executor." Miles interjected. "An excerpt that suggests the privilege was used to facilitate a conspiracy." "Your Honor, the crime-fraud exception applies." Justice Halloway took off her glasses. "I will review the letter," she said. In chambers. Alone. But Your Honor. Sterling started. Sit down. Mr. Sterling, she commanded. If the letter is purely personal, I will uphold the seal. If it contains evidence of what Mr. Arden describes, well, we shall see. The court went into recess. The wait was agony. 30 minutes. 45. The clock on the wall ticked with a mechanical indifference that made me want to scream. I sat on the hard wooden bench in the hallway, watching the trust lawyers whisper to each other. They looked nervous. They were checking their phones, typing furiously. Miles sat next to me. No matter what happens, he said quietly, you did good in there. I don't want to do good. Miles, I want to win. The bailiff opened the door. All rise. We filed back in. Justice Holloway was already seated. Her face had changed. The professional detachment was gone, replaced by a look of profound disturbance. She looked like someone who had just turned over a rock and found something writhing underneath. She held Harold Vance's letter in her hand. I have reviewed the evidence, she said. Her voice was tight. She looked at the trust's table. Mr. Sterling, the argument that this letter is protected by privacy rights is technically sound regarding the medical history of the third party. However, the admission contained within regarding the removal of an obstacle and the coordination with hospital administration constitutes evidence of systemic record manipulation. She paused. Furthermore, the court finds it deeply troubling that the entity moving to block this release, the Vancewell Trust, is acting on behalf of an anonymous party who is also the beneficiary of said manipulation. She looked at me. Ms. Russell, I am granting your motion for the unsealing of your original birth record. It will be redacted to protect the current address and medical specifics of the biological mother, as per state law, but the names will be visible. Sterling stood up. Your Honor, we intend to appeal. We request a stay. Denied. Justice Holloway said sharply, the clerk has the file. It is done. She banged the gavel. It was the loudest sound I had ever heard. The trust lawyers swarmed out of the room like angry wasps, but I didn't watch them go. I watched the clerk, a young man who looked terrified, walk over to our table with a single file folder. Here you go, ma'am, he whispered. I took the folder. My hands were numb. Open it, Miles said gently. I opened it. It was a copy of the original birth certificate from 1992. The one that was supposed to be incinerated. Name of child. Baby girl Vance. Date of birth. October 14th, 1992. Mother Eleanor Marie Vance. Father not listed. I stared at the name, Eleanor Marie Vance, and there, clipped to the back, was a billing record. Guarantor Eleanor Vance via Harold Vance Trust. Status active. Active. I looked at Miles. She is alive, I whispered. I knew that. Miles said, the settlement offer came from somewhere. No, I said, pointing to the billing code. Look at the date on the recurring payment. January 2024. I looked at the notes field. Legal retainer for privacy maintenance monthly. It wasn't just the trust. It wasn't just Harold's ghost. Eleanor Vance was paying a monthly fee to keep me buried. She wasn't a passive victim of Harold's scheme anymore. She was the active architect of my erasure. She was paying a subscription service for my silence. The realization hit me harder than the DNA test. My mother wasn't just hiding. She was investing in my absence. We were packing up our briefcases when a woman in a gray suit approached us. She wasn't one of the trust lawyers. She was older, severe, with hair pulled back so tight it pulled at her eyes. Ms. Russell, she said. Who are you? Miles asked. Stepping in front of me, I am the personal assistant to Eleanor Vance. She said. The room went quiet. Ms. Vance has been informed of the judge's ruling. The woman said. She understands that the legal wall has been breached. She would like to offer you a meeting. A meeting, I asked. Now she is in the building, the woman said. She was waiting in the private viewing gallery. I looked up at the darkened glass of the gallery booth above the courtroom. She had been there. She had watched the whole thing. She had watched her lawyers call me a gold digger. I don't want to meet her, Miles said. Leah, you don't have to do this. I do. I said. I didn't want a hug. I didn't want a reunion. I wanted to look her in the eye. I wanted to see the person who had decided I was an obstacle worth removing. One condition. I said to the assistant, no lawyers, just her and me. The woman nodded. Follow me. She led me to a conference room on the top floor of the courthouse. It was a sterile room with a long glass table and a view of the city skyline. A woman was standing by the window. She turned when I entered. It was like looking into a distorted mirror. She had my eyes. She had my chin, the Vance chin Cora had talked about. She was tall, slim, dressed in cashmere and silk. She was beautiful, but it was a cold, preserved beauty, like a flower pressed between the pages of a heavy book. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She just watched me with a terrifying stillness. You are persistent, she said. Her voice was low, cultured, showing zero emotion. I am alive, I said. That tends to make people persistent. Eleanor walked to the table and sat down. She gestured for me to sit. I remained standing. I suppose you want an apology, she said. I want an explanation. Eleanor looked at her manicured hands. There isn't much to explain. She said, it was 1992. I was 19. I was in college. I had a future. And then I had a situation. A situation. I repeated, I was a baby. Eleanor, not a flat tire. You were a crisis, she corrected. My father, your grandfather, was dead. Uncle Harold was in charge. He told me that having a child out of wedlock would destroy the family's political leverage. He told me I wasn't ready. Were you? No, she said honestly. I was terrified. I was a child myself. So when Harold said he would handle it, I let him. She looked up at me. I didn't know he was going to give you to the engineer. I thought you were going to a nice family in Connecticut. A closed adoption. Clean. But you found out. I said, years later. She admitted, when Harold got sick, he told me where you were. He told me about the affair story. And what did you do, I asked. Did you try to find me? Did you try to tell me the truth? No, she said. Why? Because it was messy, she said. The word hung in the air, cold and antiseptic. Messy, I asked, my voice rising. You were established. Eleanor said, you had parents. You had a life. If I came forward, it would have been a scandal. The press would have dug up the old records. The trust would have been exposed. My life, my peace, would have been shattered. So you paid. I said, you paid lawyers to fight me. You paid the trust to keep the records sealed. You paid to keep me in the dark. I paid to keep the order. She said, I convinced myself you were better off not knowing. I told myself that the Russells loved you and that bringing up the past would only hurt you. You didn't do it for me, I shouted. The outburst echoed in the quiet room. Eleanor flinched. Just slightly. You did it for yourself, I said, stepping closer to the table. You were afraid. You are still afraid. You are a 50-year-old woman with millions of dollars, and you are still terrified that someone might find out you made a mistake when you were 19. It wasn't just a mistake. Leah, she whispered, it was shame. I looked at her. I saw the resemblance. Yes, but I also saw the profound difference between us. She was a woman who had let her fear build a cage around her. I was the woman who had clawed my way out of it. I have one question. I said. She looked at me, waiting. Why did you let them call me what you were afraid you were? Eleanor froze. Her eyes widened. What she breathed. The affair child. I said, the bastard. The proof of sin. Grant Russell called me that for 30 years. He humiliated me to protect his ego. But you let him. You knew he was calling me that. You knew I was carrying the label of the whore's daughter so that you could play the saint. I didn't think of it like that. She stammered. Of course you didn't. I said, because you don't think about me at all. You only think about the reflection in the mirror. You let me take the hit for your choices. You let me be the scapegoat so you could be the debutante. I leaned over the table, placing my hands flat on the glass. Keep your money. Eleanor, keep your reputation. I don't want any of it. But where will you go? She asked, looking genuinely confused. What will you do? I am going to be Leah Russell, I said, not because Grant gave me the name, but because I earned it. I survived it. I turned to the door. Leah, she called out. I stopped, hand on the knob. I am sorry, she said. It sounded small, weak. I looked back at her. She looked lonely in that big, empty room. I know, I said, but your sorry is about 30 years too late to matter. I walked out of the courthouse and into the blinding afternoon sun. The air tasted sweet, like rain and asphalt. There was a commotion at the bottom of the steps. A group of reporters had gathered. The news of the judge's ruling had leaked. A scandal involving the Vancewell Trust and a secret baby was blood in the water for the Harlan City Press. And in the center of the scrum, standing near the microphones, was Grant Russell. He was wearing his best suit. He had combed his hair. He looked grave, serious, the picture of a concerned father. He saw me coming down the steps. Leah, he called out, his voice booming for the cameras. Leah, honey. He started to push through the reporters toward me. He opened his arms. My daughter, he declared. We are just so relieved the truth is out. We have always loved her, no matter the circumstances. This is a day for healing. He was performing. He was trying to pivot. He realized the affair story was dead, so he was auditioning for the role of the benevolent adoptive father who fought the system. He wanted to be the hero of the new narrative. The cameras turned to me. The microphones were thrust in my direction. Ms. Russell. Is it true you are the Vance heir, Ms. Russell? Are you reconciling with your father? Grant says he fought for you. Do you have a comment? Grant was 5 feet away. He had a desperate, pleading look in his eyes, not pleading for forgiveness, but pleading for me to play along. Don't embarrass me, his eyes said. Help me save face. I stopped. I looked at him. The old Leah would have argued. She would have screamed that he was a liar. She would have tried to expose him right there on the steps. But I wasn't the old Leah. I realized that arguing with him gave him power. It made him a participant in my life. I didn't say a word. I didn't frown. I didn't smile. I just looked through him, as if he were made of glass. Then, I sidestepped him. I walked past him, down the stairs, and onto the sidewalk. Grant stood there, his arms half open, hugging the air. The cameras caught it all. They caught the rejection. They caught the silence. They caught the irrelevance of Grant Russell. Leah. He called after me, his voice cracking. I kept walking. I found Miles waiting by his car a block away. He was leaning against the door, smiling. That was cold, he said admiringly. It was necessary. I said, I got into the passenger seat. Where to? Miles asked. Home. I said. The fallout was slow, but it was permanent. The judge's ruling triggered a state investigation into Brightstone Pavilion's records from the 90s. It turned out I wasn't the only one. There were 12 other irregular transfers, 12 other secrets buried in the filing cabinets. The Vancewell Trust tied the case up in appeals. Of course, they had infinite money. They managed to keep the specific details of the other families sealed. The truth was only half exposed, like a wound that wouldn't quite close. But my truth was out. I changed my name legally, not to Vance, and not back to Russell. I kept Russell, but I changed the middle name. I dropped Marie Marilyn's name and changed it to Verity. Truth, Leah Verity Russell. I didn't hear from Eleanor again. Her assistant sent a final email stating that the monthly payments to the legal team had ceased and wishing me the best in my future endeavors. It was a corporate firing from a family I was never hired into. Marilyn moved to a condo in Florida. She sends me postcards sometimes. They are tentative, filled with weather reports and small talk. I reply, but briefly. We are friendly, but we are not close. The lie ate too much of the foundation. And Grant is still in Harlan City. But the town turned on him. The investigation revealed that he had taken a payment disguised as a consulting fee back in 1992. The The saint narrative crumbled. He sits alone at the country club now. Paige told me he tells anyone who will listen that I am ungrateful, that I broke his heart. Let him talk. I am not listening. I sat on my balcony one evening, months later, looking at the city lights. I held the wristband fragment in my hand. I used to think my life was a tragedy because I wasn't wanted. I thought I was a mistake. But as I looked at the city, I realized I was something else entirely. I was the glitch in their perfect system. I was the variable they couldn't control. They had money, power, and history. They had the ability to rewrite reality. But I had the one thing they couldn't buy. I was real. And for the first time in 32 years, when I looked in the mirror, I didn't see an affair child, or a Vance heiress, or a Russell failure. I just saw me. And that was enough. Thank you so much for listening to My Dad Called Me the Affair Child for 28 Years. A DNA test proved them all wrong. This was a story about the heavy price of secrets and the incredible strength it takes to reclaim your own identity. I would love to know, where are you listening from today? Drop your city or country in the comments below. It is always amazing to see how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more dramas about family secrets, betrayal, and justice, please make sure to hit that subscribe button for the Revenge Stories channel. Don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. What would you have done if you were in Leah's shoes? Would you have taken the money until next time? Take care of yourselves.